Now wait just a damn minute.
Spock, start your computations for time warp.
One thing that differentiates the sci-fi boom of the 1980s from that of the 1950s is time travel. While the 50s did have a handful of time travel movies, none of them were successful enough to break out or become cultural touchstones, outside of George Pal's The Time Machine, which came out in 1960. And the 60s did have a handful of time travel movies, as did the 70s, but no decade holds a candle to the 80s in terms of the sheer volume of memorable movies about time travel. Movies like Back to the Future, The Terminator, The Final Countdown, The Philadelphia Experiment, Time Bandits, Flight of the Navigator, and Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. In the midst of all that, just south of the San Fernando Valley, two aspiring writers at UCLA performed a popular stand-up routine where a pair of hapless idiots talk about current events. They envisioned turning the routine into a movie, and both had strong enough connections in the entertainment industry to make it happen. Ed Solomon was, while still in college, already writing for Laverne and Shirley as the youngest member of the Writers Guild of America, and his writing partner, Chris Matheson, was the son of none other than Hollywood royalty Richard Matheson, writer of, among much else, Somewhere in Time.
Astonishing.
Initially, Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson didn't want their movie to be about time travel, didn't want to step into the sci-fi genre Chris's father was known for, but fate had other plans. Thus began one of the most tumultuous film productions of either of their careers, which resulted in perhaps the most bodacious 80s movie ever made.
Bill. What? Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
They do get better.
Bill S. Preston Esquire and Ted Theodore Logan are destined for greatness. One day they will change the world and become iconic figures responsible for centuries of lasting peace. But first, they must pass their final project in history class. To help them achieve this task, the people of the future and their most awesome envoy Rufus have gifted them a time machine that they can use to see history for themselves.
Solomon and Matheson's stand-up routine featured the pair acting out scenes and answering audience questions as two cheerful buffoons named Bill and Ted, high school kids infected with the valley speak and surfer lingo of Southern California teen culture.
We're in danger of flunking most heinously tomorrow, Ted.
Their original idea for a movie was an anthology-style sketch comedy featuring those two characters, with the time-traveling antics restricted to a single segment. However, it quickly became apparent that the time travel segment was the best of the bunch, and capable of sustaining an entire film on its own. So over a period of just 4 days and writing it out by hand at coffee shops, Solomon and Matheson penned a spec script with a single storyline. They considered including a segment about the Holocaust, which thankfully never made it into their script, but they did still include Adolf Hitler running amok in modern California. By the time the movie was filmed, Hitler was wisely replaced by Napoleon to keep things from getting too insensitive. There were other major changes too. The time machine was originally a Chevy van, but they changed it to avoid ripping off Back to the Future.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
Allegedly unaware that a time-traveling phone booth was an even bigger ripoff of Doctor Who. Rufus was supposed to be a 28-year-old high school sophomore they befriended, and the characters of Bill and Ted were even more young and dorky, constantly being picked on by their classmates. They were also unwittingly responsible for a handful of major historical events, such as the assassination of Julius Caesar, the destruction of the Hindenburg, and the sinking of the Titanic. By the time Solomon and Matheson finagled their way into a meeting with execs at Warner Brothers, they had already lightened the tone and removed a lot of the darker elements of the story, producing a more polished script that had been making a buzz throughout the industry. Warner was interested, but unable to figure out how to make it for less than $10 million, the studio ultimately passed on the project, but not before it got the attention of the penny-pinching producer Dino De Laurentiis. Under the stewardship of his company, the De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, the movie was finally able to be filmed on a budget of around $8.5 million. To direct, they hired 28-year-old Stephen Herek, fresh off the success of his cult sci-fi horror Critters. Let me know in the comments if you want me to cover that one. The topic of today's video was voted on by my patrons. If you'd like to have a say in some of the movies I cover, want to see bonus content, or just wish to support the growth of this channel, check out my Patreon or consider becoming a channel member. I'd like to give a special shout out to my $8 androids: Batty Bat Firebrand, Chuck Poor, Diane McGill Davis, Giffen Chumley, Jack Blair, John Burrell, Mike O'Connor, Numinous 2019, Patrick Baker, Robert McGill, Sean Vale, Spoats, TB Schrumick, and Warren Davis. I sincerely couldn't do this without you guys, so thank you all. When casting the titular leads, they auditioned upwards of 300 young actors. One of the first to come in was a young Keanu Reeves, who recently moved in from Toronto to pursue an acting career and who only had a few minor roles in television commercials to his credit. He made the shortlist of potential Teds, and despite rumors to the contrary, he wasn't cast as Bill. He just wasn't sure which character he was in the running for at the time, since everyone was auditioning for both roles. One of the reasons he got the part is that unlike many of the other candidates, he wasn't trying to do a mean-spirited satire. Rather, he was trying to portray Ted as an actual good-natured person. After the initial round, Reeves then auditioned with 23 other potential actors from the shortlist, including Donovan Leitch, Matt Adler, Gary Riley, Pauly Shore, River Phoenix, and Sean Penn. But he spent his time between auditions hanging out with another young actor, Alex Winter, who had done some work on Broadway but hadn't fully broken into Hollywood yet. Reeves and Winter had a lot in common and got along well, which didn't go unnoticed by Stephen Herek and went a long way towards the pair getting the lead roles. As for the time-traveling Rufus, who by the way is only named in the movie by Bill and Ted,
Rufus! Listen to this dude, Rufus. He knows what he's talking about.
They wanted a relatively big star like Sean Connery, who turned them down, and considered the likes of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ringo Starr, Roger Daltrey, and Charlie Sheen. It's also rumored they considered Eddie Van Halen, who would have been fitting given how much he's name-dropped.
The truth is, Wild Stallions will never be a super band until we have Eddie Van Halen on guitar.
But he was much too expensive. Rufus proved to be one of the hardest roles to cast, and it went down to the final weeks before shooting began before they finally settled on the great George Carlin. This turned out to be an excellent choice because even though he doesn't have very much screen time or acting experience, Carlin steals every scene he's in, despite playing it low-key and relatively straight. A lot of musicians appear in minor roles, including the E Street Band saxophonist Clarence Clemens, the Motels' Martha Davis, and the Tubes' Fee Waybill as the main quote-unquote future dudes, who were originally written to be ZZ Top, and the Go-Go's Jane Wiedlin as Joan of Arc. Other notable actors include former pro footballer Bernie Casey as Mr. Ryan, current CEO of Big Screen Entertainment Group Kimberly Cates as one of the princesses, character actor Hal Landon Jr. as Captain Logan, and the action movie icon and St. Louis native Al Leong as Genghis Khan. Filming began in February of 1987 in Arizona, including at the Phoenix Metro Center Mall, the Southwestern Studios in Carefree, the Coronado High School in Scottsdale, the East High School in Phoenix, the Gulfland Sunsplash Water Park in Mesa, and a Circle K in Tempe, before moving to Rome for the ancient Greece scene and the medieval sequences, with Odalscalchi Castle standing in for the evil Duke's Castle, and where the faux lightsaber fight was spontaneously improvised by Reeves and Winter. The CGI was done by Perpetual Motion Pictures, based in Tempe, Arizona, and the phone booth scenes proved so difficult to film that Winters would call it a death ride canoe. Also, just to set your mind at ease, it is in fact possible to fit over a dozen people in a phone booth, though I wouldn't recommend it. Not that I have any personal experience with such things. The initial cut of the film was almost 2.5 hours long, and had to be trimmed significantly, including the removal of a prom scene, a musical number, an entire subplot involving a character named John the Surf, and more. The ending was also completely reshot, because in the original version, Bill and Ted give their presentation in class under more conventional conditions, and it felt pretty anticlimactic. Thus, the auditorium scenes were added to give it more flair and excitement. All seemed to be going well, and the film was slated to be released by De Laurentiis Entertainment Group in February of 1988. But that didn't happen. It turns out that while the film was in post-production, the De Laurentiis Entertainment Group was facing bankruptcy and had to sell the majority of their distribution rights to Nelson Entertainment for a paltry $1.5 million. Nelson funded the film's completion and is credited as the primary production company, beside Interscope Communications, but for a time, it was assumed that due to Nelson's status as a home video company, and due to the fact that every company they showed the film to didn't understand it, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was destined for a lackluster direct-to-video release, or, even worse, for cable.
Bogus!
However, it was saved from obscurity by wildly successful test screenings, which, after a competitive bidding war, convinced Orion Pictures to distribute the film theatrically. Thus, on President's Day weekend of 1989, a full year after its originally planned release, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure debuted to scathing reviews from critics, who absolutely eviscerated it in the press. It opened in third place behind The Burbs and Rain Man,
No way!
but managed to have staying power week after week, becoming a sleeper hit that ultimately grossed over $40 million.
Excellent!
But its legacy became much more than just box office success. It spawned video games, comic books, a breakfast cereal, 2 sequels, an animated series, a live-action television show, a board game, and more. February 17th is recognized as Be Excellent Day, and the city of San Dimas, California has embraced its part in the film with its 50th anniversary slogan being San Dimas 1960 to 2010, an excellent adventure.
San Dimas High School football rule!
On top of all that, it also launched the career of modern-day patron saint of the internet Keanu Reeves, who at first lamented that he would be typecast as Ted for the rest of his life, but later learned to love the reputation it gave him in the early days of his Hollywood career.
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Before I get to my opinion on the film, let's get one thing straight. I was 10 years old when Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure hit theaters. Because of this simple fact, I don't think I'm capable of being objective about it. When I saw the movie, its adolescent humor and joyful tone really struck a chord with me, and I won't deny that it got me more interested in history. I understand why, according to Alex Winter, history teachers love the movie for how it affected kids like me, but I also understand why English teachers hate it for what it did to the language.
How's it going, fruit dude?
Das muss ein Traum sein?
As an adult, watching the movie for the first time in a decade or so, I still love Bill and Ted and think their first movie holds up pretty well. It's definitely a comedy first and foremost that gently satirizes slacker culture, but it also tackles a common question not just in science fiction but in daily life. How would famous historical figures react to the modern world? Cynics like to think they'd be horrified by what we've done with the place, but I love how the movie goes in a different direction, showing them as gleeful about how just plain awesome modern life can be. I know it's simplistic and inaccurate in many ways, but I also think there's a kernel of truth to the idea that people of the past would have loved to see the progress we've made in the present, even as a lot of us fail to appreciate it. I think, generally speaking, we overestimate the dignity of the past alongside the banality of the present, and this is one of the rare stories to make that case. Also, as a known extreme nitpicker of time travel stories, I must give credit to this movie for sticking firm to its rules. Sure, there are things that don't make a lot of sense, like the one-day time limit to get the project completed, or the fact that Rufus needed to go back in time in the first place, but at least its rules are consistent. I also think using the bootstrap paradox as a goofy plot point is hilarious, something that wouldn't be topped until Philip J. Fry turned out to be his own grandfather. For all these reasons, for its cultural impact, for its positive outlook on history and humanity, for its quirky 80s humor, for introducing us to Keanu Reeves, and for being more intelligently written than it has any right to be, Bill & Ted's Excellent Adventure is, totally a sci-fi classic. And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. What's your favorite 80s time travel movie? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching, and until next time, when we're going to start something new for the month of February, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
Be excellent to each other.
Party on, dude.